Hello and welcome to Monday Morning from Useful Idiots, where we go over the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. We ruin our Sundays to brighten your Mondays. I'm Katie Halper.
And I'm Aaron Maté. And yes,
how's it going?
Going good. Happy Monday, everybody, and
happy Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth. That's right. Yeah. Do we have any announcements in the Useful Idiots universe?
Well, of course you got to like the stream. I mean, you don't have to, but you're invited to like it. Pay your duty. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Ask not what Useful Idiots stream can do for you, because we already know what we do for you. We brighten your Mondays. But ask what you can do for Useful Idiots, and that's give it a thumbs up. And also subscribe. And I'll be doing a call-in right after the show.
Nice. Very nice.
Solo call-in, yeah.
Yeah. Link in the chat or link in the description.
In the chat. Yeah. Link in the description, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we missed him last week, but he's back. Let's get to the Chuckster.
Good Sunday morning and a happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. As one former prosecutor put it pretty bluntly this week, 2 years from now, Donald Trump could be in prison or he could be president. With Trump holding a commanding lead over the Republican field this week, his opponents face the question that will dominate this race over the next 6 months. Will they, can they, and should they go after the former president over his federal indictment and Trump's legal issues that are likely to come? First, let's tackle the will they. Clearly, it would be the best way for any Republican candidate not named Trump to get some attention. But so far, the most direct criticism has come from single-digit candidates Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson. Hutchinson called on Trump to drop out of the race after the indictment, saying it's simply wrong to be discussing a pardon. And Christie said the conduct in the indictment is awful. But as Trump appeared in a Florida courtroom, even opponents who have criticized the charges as serious and as Donald Trump's behavior as reckless have diminished that very criticism of Trump with attacks against the Justice Department for bringing the charges against him in the first place. And before the case was even tried, they've been leaping to a promise of a pardon.
This is my commitment on January 20th, 2025, if I'm elected the next U.S. president, to pardon Donald J. Trump.
I think it would be terrible for the country to have a former president in prison for years because of a documents case. So I would be inclined in favor of a pardon.
It's so funny that they just openly are saying that it would be horrible to have a former president in jail or in prison. Like, they're really giving voice to the idea that presidents shouldn't get in trouble.
Yes,
you know what I mean? Like, they're saying the quiet part out loud.
Yes. They certainly feel that way about.
I think it's real.
Sorry. Yeah.
About George W. Bush, who for a number of things, and I guess it's consistent to just continue that view.
Right. And of course, you know who was big in that view was none other than Barack Obama, who didn't do anything about George Bush because we tortured some folks. Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
Really premature at this point when he's not even been convicted.
We're going to clean house at FBI Justice. We're going to do a lot. But part of it is using your Article 2 powers to redress wrongs, including potentially pardons. If there was a different standard, we're going to be very inclined to grant clemency in those situations.
Let's tackle part two of this question. Can they go after him on this? In a Quinnipiac poll this week, Trump leads the Republican field by 30 percentage points, garnering 53% of the vote, so over a majority. And in an NPR PBS Marist poll, while just 43% of Americans overall believe Trump should continue running for president given this indictment, a whopping 83% of Republicans believe he should keep running. Only 13% of Republicans believe Trump has even done anything illegal. Changing those voters' mind in a conservative media ecosystem that, at least for now, plans to defend Trump under any circumstances will be an uphill battle. The final part of this question, should they go after him? One candidate who has a pretty explicit take on the seriousness of protecting classified information, regardless of someone's money or position, was candidate Donald Trump in 2016.
In my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law. We can't have someone in the Oval Office who doesn't understand the meaning of the word confidential or classified. One of the first things we must do is to enforce all classification rules and to enforce all laws relating to the handling of classified information.
Now, perhaps.
There's always a tape. There's always a tape, especially in
Right.
politics. That's
But
really, really funny.
It is, but you know what? Trump critics never really get this through their head, which is that his supporters don't care about hypocrisy from him, because
Oh,
it's
certainly
almost
not.
like,
No.
because I think the view is that his supporters have is like all presidents are hypocritical. This guy just kind of is less hypocritical almost because he doesn't pretend to not be a hypocrite.
Mhm.
So he's almost half as hypocritical as other
Mhm.
politicians.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that. I mean, he is more blunt and about willing to acknowledge, like he'll pretend that he's against the system that he benefits from, and
Right.
that appeals. So people give him more of a pass.
Right. Like he
More,
cheats on his taxes, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
But he wants to change. You know, he's like, let's change the rules. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can stop here. Great. Alrighty. So what do we have up next?
Well,
Oh,
here's-
Aaron, you may want to refresh your.
Chuck has a.
I think you should refresh your, if possible,
Am I
your browser. There's a little. Hi guys, we're gonna get through this. Aaron's very temporary absence. A lot of people in the chat think he's being persecuted or unfairly targeted, which we've entertained as a possibility. And welcome back, Aaron.
I'm back, and so Chuck is going to explain to us why this prosecution of Trump is basically totally normal. Nothing to see here.
Welcome back. Data download time. Donald Trump's arraignment this week was a watershed event for this country. But according to our friends at Axios, since 1980, about half of the nations in the world have seen former leaders jailed or prosecuted, including in quite a few democracies. In fact, among leaders who have left office after 2000, there are 76 countries where we have seen leaders jailed or prosecuted. Let's look at a few of these cases, and we're going to start with Central and South America. In Guatemala, we're going to start there. Former President Molina and his vice president, Roxana Valdetti, both found guilty of corruption last year. Alfonso Portillo pled guilty to attempting to launder $2.5 billion through U.S. banks. In Panama, former Presidents Martinelli and Varela have been called to stand trial in a massive money laundering probe. And of course, that international corruption scandal in Brazil took down President Lula, but he was able to run for office again and win the presidency after his case was annulled. Let's go to Europe. In France, former President Nicolas Sarkozy must wear an ankle bracelet for a year after he lost his appeal of a corruption conviction. And that follows the convictions of former President Chirac and Prime Minister Fillon. Let's go to Israel, where Bibi Netanyahu is currently on trial for corruption charges, even as he currently serves as Prime Minister. His predecessor, Ehud Olmert, served 16 months in prison for accepting bribes and obstructing justice. In South Korea, former President Park Geun-hye served 5 years in prison for corruption charges. And just this past week, former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi passed away at the age of 86. Well, he too had some brushes with the law. He was investigated a lot. He ended up with one conviction for tax fraud in 2013. And guess what? Donald Trump wasn't even the only former government leader to be arrested this week. Meet Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister of Scotland. She was arrested for financial misconduct, though she was later released without being charged, pending further investigation. So, what happened to Trump this week may have been unprecedented.
I wonder if Chuck engineered Nicola Sturgeon's arrest just to make it look weak. because Chuck could say like, yeah, look, see, Alex got arrested this week, so
Right.
it's totally normal. Because like, and then they
I
released her
wouldn't put it
without
past
charge.
him.
So what if Chuck was the mastermind of all this? Because Chuck wants. I mean, look, he's making the point that it's not unprecedented for a former president to be charged. It happens all the time. Fair enough, but I mean, the context he's missing here. I think this is fair. I think Trump supporters have the right to point this out, that they have used lawfare to go after Trump. They framed him as a Russian agent. They've impeached him twice. He's faced all sorts of he faced charges over the Stormy Daniels thing. There definitely has been a weaponization of government to undermine him. In this case, I mean, it is true. It does look like he actually is guilty with the documents thing, but I don't think you've seen in other places such an effort to use, the law and use the intelligence agencies to undermine an elected president, at least in the U.S.
Right. Yeah. True, but at least I got this nice mashup.
Great
out of
mashup,
it.
and and again, it does look like they actually got Trump here on this documents thing when he could have avoided it had he just cooperated. That's
Right.
what it looks like. Okay, well, here for her always totally unbiased, objective insights is Biden's former spokesperson, now MSNBC host, Jen Psaki.
Phrase that Donald Trump and his defenders have thrown around a lot over the last few months: two-tiered justice system. Now, that phrase typically describes the unequal application of the law in this country. Essentially, one system for the wealthy and well-connected and another system for everyone else. Of course, there's plenty of evidence to support that. There is a two-tier justice system, like this recent study from Syracuse University, showing how white-collar crimes are historically prosecuted at lower levels than other kinds of offenses, which disproportionately affect poorer, more diverse communities. And you can see evidence of a two-tier justice system in the demographics of our prisons. According to the NAACP, Black and Hispanic Americans collectively make up 32% of the U.S. population, but they represent up to 56% of the U.S. incarcerated population. That is a two-tier justice system, one in desperate need of reform. But that is not at all what Trump and his fellow Republicans are talking about.
This looks like another example of a two-tiered system of justice.
It's completely a two-tiered system of justice.
This is a dual system of justice.
It's a two-tier justice system simply to go after President Trump.
The two-tier system of justice is targeting him and anyone who's supporting him next.
It's just happening against Republicans with a targeted focus on President Trump.
So Trump and his allies are attempting to co-opt the idea of a two-tier justice system to essentially own the phrase in order to push their baseless claim that Trump is held to a different standard. Now, in a sense, he has been held to a different standard, just not in the way they think, because Trump has actually been treated more leniently. In most cases where an individual willfully holds onto thousands of pages of the country's most sensitive documents, they typically don't get an opportunity to just give them back and get off scot-free. But Donald Trump got that opportunity many times. He could have returned the documents immediately when the National Archives first asked him for them. He didn't. When he finally decided to work with the archives, he could have returned everything. He didn't. He could have complied with the Justice Department's grand jury subpoena. He didn't. Instead, according to the indictment, Trump conspired to keep those documents full of national security secrets for himself. And he even reportedly ignored the advice of his own lawyers who told him to comply with the DOJ's requests.
I mean, I will say about all this, there also is a really funny irony of Trump being indicted under the same Espionage Act that his Justice Department indicted Julian Assange under.
Right.
And Trump, after claiming he loved Julian Assange, after William Barr and Mike Pompeo basically indicted Assange, Trump was like, he just basically washed his hands of it and basically sold Julian Assange out, threw him under the bus. And so now there is a funny irony, and now it's being used to go after Trump. And Jen Psaki here, I think, is making a fair point. He was given the opportunity. He did ignore the government. The question, for me is like, is this worthy of this much attention? And is there a double standard being applied here? Like, is Trump getting away with something? Is Trump being held to account for something that Clinton got away with? I think, I think that's true that it is, but certainly he put himself in this position.
Right. I think it's both, honestly.
Yeah.
Right. I think like there's something exceptional about what he did, and also there is a double standard. But his refusal to cooperate was just like kind of weird and delusional.
Very, very silly.
Yeah.
Very, very silly. Okay. Is that enough, Jen Psaki? I think we can move on.
I think so, yeah. And it is kind of funny watching them talk about the people who don't care at all about the two-tier justice system. All of a sudden are talking about it when it comes to Donald Trump.
Two-tiered. That's a new catchword. Two-tiered. Yeah. All right. Mike Pence. He was given like, I don't know, the full hour on Meet the Press yesterday, because for some reason we have to hear from Mike Pence. He's like being presented as the voice of reason.
Right.
Here he is talking to the Chuckster, not happy with Trump's messaging on Ukraine.
Not at all. Or Joe Biden's behavior. Let's see what he has to say.
As the leader of the free world, we're the arsenal of democracy. Under our administration, we made the largest increase in investment in our national.
What does that mean, the arsenal of democracy? So, like,
I mean, yeah.
Like democracy is like a weapon.
Cache. Yeah.
Yeah. And we use the weapon for what? To like destroy other democracies.
Yeah, exactly. We have to fight. We fight for peace. It's kind of a good tell, though. Like he's militarizing our democracy.
Administration, we made the largest increase in investment in our national defense in 40 years. And then we unleash the American military to take down the ISIS caliphate, take down the world's most dangerous terrorists. We even confronted the Russians in Syria, took out 100 Russian soldiers without one American casualty. And Russia never even attempted to redraw international lines by force during our administration. We did peace through strength. Now, my former running mate, seeing war raging in Eastern Europe.
So let's just go through what Mike Pence said were his administration's big accomplishments. They had a record increase of the military budget. He's really proud of that. And then also they killed 100 Russians in Syria, which is true. There was this battle where some Russian mercenaries were killed by U.S. forces. And that's a great thing.
I mean, that's what you do when you're running the arsenal of democracy.
With so much peace. So much peace through strength.
So much peace. Yeah.
Every bullet that killed those Russians was a democracy bullet.
Yeah. Democracy bullet. Yeah.
Is signaling an ambiguous message, not even able to say who he would prefer to see win the war in Ukraine. Well, I think the United States needs to stand by the courageous fighters in Ukraine, give them the resources more quickly than Joe Biden has to take the fight to the Russians and repel this invasion.
What do you tell your former colleagues in the House Republican Conference who don't share this view?
I like the way Chuck, I mean, he's kind of right here, but he's so obviously impressed with himself. He's like, I'm going to drop this own right here into the conversation. I'm going to interrupt him and really nail him. And now he's really impressed. Okay.
What do you do?
Look,
what do you do about the people who question the arsenal of democracy? What do you do about them?
Yeah. Arsenal doubters.
Yeah. They're a problem. They're a problem.
Look at that body language, by the way.
I respectfully disagree. Ronald Reagan in 1985 coined what came to be known as the Reagan Doctrine. That was, if you're willing to fight the communists in your country, we'll give you the tools to fight them there so we don't have to fight them here. I mean,
so great. He's saying the quiet
if you're
part
willing
out
to
loud
massacre peasants in Central America, or if you're
you there?
I'm gonna refresh. I'll be right back.
Okay. Now look what happens. It is amazing that he brings up Reagan, not just Reagan, but his relationship to communism, which of course, as Aaron was saying, brings to memory the dirty wars in Central America, the death squads that we funded and trained, and of course the Iran-Contra scandal. But because not only are these people Reagan heads, these people being Republicans, there's such an irresponsible and unlearned and ignorant media that he can get away with praising Reagan's foreign policy and treatment of communists without Chuck Todd saying anything. That's when Chuck Todd could be like, well, what about the Iran-Contra scandal? But no.
I mean, Joe Biden is.
Oh, sorry. Are you talking? CIA got Aaron as someone put in the chat.
Done such a terrible job explaining the importance of repelling the Russian invasion and supporting the military of Ukraine. And he's.
Oh, another thing he revealed was, as you like to quote Adam Schiff on this, Aaron, frequently, which is an important reminder, which is we were going to fight them over there instead of fighting them over here. So Pence is admitting this is a proxy war.
Yeah, I mean, which is just, it's so, I mean, Reagan literally said that about the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, that Nicaragua is only a few days drive from someplace in Texas. So the Sandinistas, who's like, you know, their mandate was basically trying to end decades of kleptocratic rule in Nicaragua under the Somoza regime, you know, focused on like land reform and education, that somehow they were gonna go and drive into Texas to fight the U.S., it was so dumb. But yet that idiocy is now being parroted today to talk about the Russians. So somehow Russia is going to come fight the U.S. over here. I don't know where they're going to enter from. Like, are they going to come in on the West Coast, East Coast? Like, where the Russians are going to come in if we don't fight a proxy war against them in Ukraine? It's so dumb, but yet no one ever challenges it.
Right. Or the Mujahideen, another great example.
Let's keep playing this one.
Yeah.
And he's been delivering the equipment slowly. He promised 33 Abrams tanks in January. They're still not there yet. And they're continuing to drag their feet on aircraft. But look, our national interest there.
It's half your party that doesn't even want what he's been sending over.
Yeah, well, it's number one, it's not half. And
classic Chuck. He doesn't like this criticism of Biden because, you know, he supports Biden on the proxy war. So Chuck has to find a way to blame the Republicans.
Right.
And of course, like the debate is so skewed because they're accepting the premise that Biden should be fueling the proxy war even more, rather than pushing for peace talks, which of course you can't even discuss on TV. Even though, by the way, Putin just said he was speaking to a group of African leaders, and he produced a document that he said Ukraine had signed, and he said that this was the agreement that was basically sabotaged by the UK and the US last April. And it was a peace treaty, like the outline of a peace treaty in which Ukraine would be neutral and Russia would withdraw to its pre-February 2022 lines. And you can't, you know, that's pretty big news. Like, maybe Putin's making it up. Maybe this document's a fake, but at least you got to give people the news he's doing that. But no, doesn't get reported.
Well, Aaron, I think we all know that he's playing by the RPB, Russian playbook. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Number two,
the House Republicans.
Look, I think the skepticism about support for the military in Ukraine is more a reflection of a lack of confidence in Joe Biden as commander-in-chief than it is any other issue.
What this is going to take, Trump out there also fueling
what this is going to take is leadership, having a president that says to the American people, look, it is in our national interest to see the Russian military repelled from Ukraine. Not for Joe Biden talks about glossy goals of democracy. No.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if Russia overruns Ukraine, I predict you it would not be too long before the Russian army crossed the border where our men and women in uniform would have to go and fight.
Poland.
By crossing into a NATO ally. Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Chuck. And I also believe that by giving Ukraine the ability to repel the Russian invasion, we will send a deafening message to China that the wider world will not tolerate them using force to redraw international lines in Taiwan or anywhere in the Asia Pacific.
The whiter world. I thought he said it first.
Yeah. That's what he cares about. Yeah, I mean, it's such lunacy. Like, for example,
Look
right
at that
now,
expression.
but right now, like Putin, like, and Russia, they're, all this weaponry that is being sent into Ukraine to kill Russians is coming through places like Poland. So Russia right now would have a strong interest, if ever they were crazy enough to go into Poland, to do it now, to go and attack NATO bases there. But they haven't done that because they don't want a wider war between Russia and NATO, because that's game over for the planet. And the U.S. doesn't want that either. That's why everyone agrees that the fight should be kept in Ukraine. And the decision is, rather than have any diplomacy to end it, let's just keep it going. So it's Ukraine that gets destroyed because no one else wants to fight each other anywhere else.
Right.
And but I appreciate that Pence said that, like, talking about democracy is silly. Like, he says, like, that's a joke. At least he's honest enough to admit that.
I like that he, although he himself talks about the arsenal of democracy. Some double talk.
The arsenal, the arsenal doesn't extend to Ukraine, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just not. Yeah. By the way, we should say, I meant to say this at the beginning of the show, that RIP, since we're talking about documents, to someone who had very important documents, much more important than Doc Talk, and that is, of course, Daniel Ellsberg of the Pentagon Papers, who died this weekend. So,
yes, he had cancer, and he was given a few months to live recently, and he chose to, forego any treatment and just spend his time in peace and with his family and enjoying the things that he loves. And what a life! What a life! What a hero! He changed the world, and he changed the world because he was willing to sacrifice his life for this. He was willing to go to prison for the rest of his life by leaking the Pentagon Papers and ending the Vietnam War. And he was a wonderful person.
He really was.
And
we interviewed him on Useful Idiots and also on the Katie Halper Show. We should release some clips of those interviews because he was so great. Okay. All right. Awkward transition, but after praising a very important person, let's go back to very unimportant people. And let's go to our next clip, which is...
It's... well, Mike Pence talked there about sending a message to China.
Right.
Because what better reason to sacrifice tens of thousands of Ukrainians and to send a message to a country far away in China?
Yes.
So right now, Blinken is on a trip to China to try to mend ties after some. And so here is Margaret Brennan, who I believe is traveling with Blinken to Beijing.
Is in Beijing. Margaret, it looks like good evening to you.
It is, Bob, and good morning to you. Here in Beijing, more than 5.5 hours worth of talks between Secretary Blinken and his Chinese counterpart concluded. They were very direct, they were very candid, but frankly, it's good that they were talking at all. Bob, one of the U.S. officials in the room told me there was at least one point of agreement, and that was to stop the downward spiral in this relationship. But it is clear they still have profound differences.
Secretary Blinken and Foreign Minister Qin Gang, a close ally of President Xi Jinping, tackled a long list of grievances. The U.S. goal? Open communication channels to avoid a military clash. Tension spiked last summer when then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan. And again in February after the spy balloon shoot-down. Now President Biden wants to move on.
I don't think the leadership knew where it was, knew what minute, knew what time. I think it was more embarrassing.
Beijing objects to the U.S. military presence in the Pacific. China's defense chief refuses to speak with U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at a time when Beijing is massively expanding its nuclear arsenal.
The door is open, and my phone line is open.
Miscommunication risks a clash. Last month, a Chinese warship came within 150 feet of slamming into an American ship transiting the Taiwan Strait. And in the South China Sea, a Chinese fighter jet buzzed the U.S. Air Force. The divide runs deeper than a failure to communicate.
By the way, I just have to add that something ironic is that, Lloyd Austin, they were just talking about how they're trying to get a meeting with the Chinese defense minister. The lines of communication are open. Biden won't lift sanctions on said Chinese defense minister. So maybe that's why it can't get a meeting with him.
That's why. Yes, that might be right. he won't pick up the phone because he's under sanction. Yeah. Maybe he's looking out for Lloyd Austin. He doesn't want Lloyd Austin to be hit with a penalty for talking to somebody who's sanctioned.
Right. That could, maybe if they were willing to actually look at that, they could turn that around.
Like the framing of this is so silly. It's like you're talking about two equal sides, like just having a clash over like, who's in the water. But like it's in Asia. Like why is the U.S. there? It's so far away from the U.S. Why is the U.S. Flying its warships and sailing its ships there? It's just like that question is never asked. The only question is how much more should we be expanding our military there?
Well, we have a big democracy arsenal, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
We got to spend it.
Mm-hmm.
Blinken also pressed authorities to crack down on the flow of fentanyl. That drug is now the #1 killer of Americans under the age of 50. Beijing has its own motivations to meet. It wants investments to continue to flow as its economy is slowing. The recent Biden administration decision to cut off the sale of some advanced technology and high-end computer chips is causing concern.
Secretary Blinken will have a working dinner with his Chinese counterpart tonight and tomorrow. He plans to meet with a top party official who oversees foreign policy. All of these meetings really an intense push to try to hit restart on this relationship. Bob?
All right. Well, it's hard to hit restart when China is daring to do things like set up a spying facility in Cuba, like a surveillance base in Cuba, which China recently did, and now that's a new supposed outrage for neocons to deal with. The idea that another country could dare, have their own presence in another country near the U.S. when all the U.S. has is like 802 military bases around the world, but China has some sort of outpost now in Cuba. And that's not a good thing. So this is H.R. McMaster speaking about it to Margaret Brennan.
So recently it was publicly disclosed that China has set up and rebuilt part of its listening facilities that are located in nearby Cuba. Right. Secretary Blinken acknowledged that this week. Yeah. To a lot of people,
by the way, breaking news, but they're making this seem like new news and a newsworthy story, but they've had a station in Cuba since before Biden. It's not new.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know. For some reason, it just came out now. Good timing, I guess. Right before Blinken goes to Beijing.
Right. Yeah. Interesting timing. Indeed. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, let's go. Let's play the tape.
They hear and see something like that and they think of the old Cold War.
Right.
How different is this model?
It's worse. It's worse because it's a more difficult problem set because of the way that our economies have become interconnected, in large measure based on these flawed assumptions about the nature of the relationship and especially the intentions of the Chinese Communist Party. That's what we got wrong. Mm-hmm. We thought that we could determine the behavior of the party.
This is worse than the Cold War. Because we actually have an economic relationship with China, which would make a land war very, very uncomfortable. So that's what people who want the planet to continue would see as something positive. Mm-hmm. But when you're literally out of Dr. Strangelove, you see it as something negative. Yeah. Look at that face. Face only mother could love.
By the way we engage them. But hey, guess what? I mean, the Chinese Communist Party leadership had aspirations that went far beyond anything in reaction to what we do. And China really does want to establish itself, as it sees it, at the center.
How dare they? That's our lane. We're the world police.
Yeah, that's our lane. That is our lane.
Yeah.
This is not cool. This is not cool.
Not cool. So not cool.
Yeah.
We may have to go to war with our near peer. You know, that's such a scary term for some reason, near peers.
Near peer?
Yeah. Yeah, near peer. By the way, how are we doing in likes? I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Wilson, how are we at on likes?
I'm seeing 591.
Oh my
which
God,
is
guys,
very
that
surprising
is
because
so pathetic.
we showed everybody Chuck in glasses today, and I thought that would get hundreds,
Yeah,
maybe
what
thousands
the
of likes.
hell? What's half of? We should be at 800 at least. And now, you guys think I like stopping the stream to scold you? Well, I know some of you do. Some of you like it getting scolded, but most people don't. It's so easy. All you do is literally hit the thumbs up. We should get to 800. Let's get to 800.
718. Maybe people just need to remember his glasses.
I mean, we can. What we can do is just skip Chuck next week if you'd like.
It's like Clark Kent.
What'd you say?
It's like Clark Kent, Chuck Kent.
Oh yeah.
That's a big weapon in our democracy arsenal. Is
Yeah.
the Chuckster? We can withhold him.
We can withhold him, yeah. And then you're really going to miss him because he's only here this summer. So don't make us do that. It hurts me more than it hurts you. Okay, I'm going to be strict. We're at 778. We got to get to 800. I can't do a I can't bluff. 783. We're almost there. And of course, we love you, our audience, and we love the ones. We got to it? All right. Don't like it twice. That unlikes it. All right. Let's keep going. Next. Okay, next
up.
We got Aaron's favorite.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is polling really well in the Democratic primary. He's at like 20% or something like that. Maybe even more, according to some polls. So he's becoming a problem for Biden. So here he is now being he's being discussed by Senator Whitehouse, who is apparently a friend of RFK Jr. and he's got to answer for that. So here he is.
So recently it was public.
Before you go, I want to ask you a question. I know you are longtime friends with Bobby Kennedy Jr. You guys went to law school together. He supported your initial campaigns, all of your campaigns, campaigned with you. What do you make of his run against Joe Biden? And are you still in touch with him? Are you still close with him?
Not so much, particularly not since this political episode has begun. I 100% support President Biden. I don't think that vaccines are a hoax or a scam or dangerous. And I strongly, strongly support the people of Ukraine in their bid for freedom under the onslaught of the Russian military, because I think that's the frontier for freedom around the world. So I think Joe Biden has those issues and others right, and I'm more than happy to support President Biden for re-election.
The frontier for freedom. I mean, it's so stupid, so stupid. But yeah, exciting times. RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, Cornel West just got in the race too. Hopefully, this becomes an even bigger problem for Biden, and maybe he has to debate some of these people. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Impressive that the media is finally acknowledging them.
Yeah. It'd be great to see Cornel West and RFK Jr. talk about Israel. So Israel-Palestine. So Cornel West could give him some feedback. Yes, some education. Because man, oh man, RFK Jr. Sometimes RFK Jr.'s position on Israel sounds worse than Biden's.
I think sometimes it does. Yeah. It just sounds like he's been held captive. He's gotten some AIPAC talking points lobbed at him.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. And by the way, I had Cornell on the Katie Halper show last week. And we talked about that very issue. Yeah. Yeah, it was a great time. YouTube.com/The Katie Halper Show. It's all there. All righty. What's our next clip? Let's see. Now we have Adam Schiff. Now, this is Aaron's favorite. Yeah.
There is an enemies list. You're probably on it. I'm sure you've thought about.
Wait, let's rewind it.
I mean, and if there is an enemies list, you're probably on it. I'm sure you've thought about this. What could a Trump DOJ do to make your life difficult?
Well, just the other day, Trump said I should be imprisoned. And of course, it's not the first time he's called for jailing me. And, you have to wonder, could a President Trump, unshackled by any opposition, somehow use the Justice Department to imprison his enemies? There are a lot of things that we have seen take place in this country in the last several years that we never would have imagined possible. We thought we were exceptional in the sense of this was a problem other countries had. It wasn't a problem in the United States of America. But we have seen since Trump's election the steady degradation of our institutions. And were he given the chance again, you can't bet against how he would try to abuse the Justice Department. But I would also say it's a badge of honor to be on his enemies list. As Franklin Roosevelt said, there are times when you can judge a person by the enemies they make. And I think they view me as a threat. They don't like the work I did on the January 6th committee or my work in leading the first impeachment trial to a bipartisan vote to convict. But it's not going to deter me. I will say this, though. It is occupying the nation's time when we have to focus on things like homelessness and the high cost of housing. President Biden is doing exactly what he should. Those are the issues I'm focused on. But these constant political attacks do soak up the time and attention of the public.
He's so dishonest.
Yeah.
First of all, what has Adam Schiff done to tackle the issue of homelessness? Like, he spent Trump's presidency claiming that Trump was a Russian agent and that he had seen proof of it.
Right.
I didn't hear him talk.
Which you couldn't share with us.
Yeah, which you couldn't share with us. I didn't hear him talk about how we have to tackle homelessness or do anything about it. I mean, he's made fueling a Cold War with Russia his top priority, and that's what he's put above all else. And I love how he argues that like he's Trump and the Republicans are going after him because he's so effective. When Adam Schiff brought the first impeachment against Trump over Ukraine, after Trump froze some weapons to Ukraine while Rudy Giuliani was trying to like gin up an investigation of the Bidens in Ukraine, Trump ended that impeachment with the highest approval ratings of his presidency. Okay. And that was because that was Adam Schiff. So Adam Schiff getting up on the House floor saying we have to aid Ukraine so that we can fight Russia over there. We don't have to fight Russia here. Right. That didn't land. No one cared. And that's why Trump had the highest approval ratings of his presidency after that first impeachment where he was acquitted, which Adam Schiff also didn't mention. He talks about a bipartisan vote to convict. Yeah, a couple Republicans voted with him, but Trump came out of that impeachment actually stronger than before. So he's just he's really funny. He's very funny. And what's happening now with him is also very funny because basically the reason apparently that Dianne Feinstein is being kept in her Senate seat, even though she's really she's not there and she should not be in that position, is because Gavin Newsom has promised to appoint a black woman to replace any vacant Senate seat. And so that would go to Barbara Lee because she's a current member of Congress. And they don't want, Nancy Pelosi doesn't want it to go to Barbara Lee because that would help Barbara Lee in her race to replace Feinstein because they want Adam Schiff to have that job. So they're keeping Barbara Lee out of the Senate right now and keeping Dianne Feinstein in just to help Adam Schiff.
Right. Listen to black women unless that will harm Adam Schiff's electoral potential.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Chris Christie, another, Trump foe, former, but in this case, he was a former Trump sycophant. Now he's a Trump foe, and he's in the ring and he's going all out. So here he is.
Trump on his social media site is attacking former Trump officials that who have criticized him over the indictment. He's saying his former chief of staff, retired Marine General John Kelly, has a very small brain. For some reason, he put brain in quotation marks. He also called Kelly a mummy who sat in his office and stared at the ceiling. Trump called his former Attorney General Bill Barr a gutless pig, lazy, and totally ineffective. What do you make of the comments?
Well, look, Jake, I stood on the stage in 2016 and heard Donald Trump say he would only hire the very, very best people and he would know how to manage them. But think about what happens here. Here's what he says about Rex Tillerson when he gets in. He says he's the embodiment of the American dream, former CEO of ExxonMobil. He said when he left, here's what he said about him. He's dumb as a rock and lazy as hell. About General Mattis, four-star General Mad Dog Mattis, he said he was our very best general and that he was the closest thing we had to Patton. When he left, he said he was the most overrated general in American history. You mentioned Bill Barr and John Kelly already. How about Mick Mulvaney, who is his director of the Office of Management and Budget and his chief of staff? He said he was outstanding and brilliant. And when Mick Mulvaney left, he said he was a born loser. Lastly, how about General Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? He said he was a great American and a great patriot when he joined the administration. When General Milley disagreed with him and he left, he called him pathetic and a blanking loser. Now, look, either Donald Trump, if you believe what he said when they left, that means he didn't pick the very best people and doesn't know how to pick personnel. If you believe what he said at the beginning, the great stuff, then this guy is the worst manager in the history of the American presidency. Either way, Republicans should listen to what he says. He's a petulant child when someone disagrees with him. And whether it's Bill Barr or John Kelly or General Mattis, whether it is Mick Mulvaney or whether it's, General Milley, if you disagree with Donald Trump, the petulant child comes out and he calls you names like the ones you just mentioned and the ones I mentioned.
So the RNC just said the candidates have to pledge to support the nominee in order to participate in the debates. Former Governor Asa Hutchinson, he tried to get a carve-out so the candidates would not have to be required to support a nominee if that nominee is a convicted felon. The RNC said, no, you have to stand by the nominee.
It was a little glitchy there, but I think we got it.
We got the point. Yeah,
that was a really funny list from Chris Christie of all of Trump's flip-flopping on his personnel choices.
I enjoyed that. Yeah,
I mean that's the problem. See, Trump. There is something really entertaining about all this. Like, there's no other president like that who would throw everybody he hires under the bus, because also they've thrown him under the bus. It's weird. You have so many people who work for Trump who hate his guts and openly and constantly criticize him. Even Mike Pompeo this week, who was such a Trump loyalist, threw him under the bus over the documents thing because they don't like him. And they find him really
he's erratic and unpredictable. Yeah.
He's so unpredictable, yes. But it makes it, scary for the world, but it's also entertaining at the same time. It just is. Okay, let's hear more insight from H.R. McMaster about Blinken's visit to China.
The key phrases, the key things you were looking for and watching for out of this meeting?
I think competition and a recognition on our part that the Chinese Communist Party has to change its behavior for there to be a better relationship. There's always an impulse in diplomacy to think that a better relationship is an end in and of itself. Mm-hmm. But actually, if the perception is that we're going to make concession after concession just for a better relationship, the outcome could be something that appears like a diplomatic achievement, but it could be a political disaster.
No, a better relationship is an end in itself, if you care about diplomacy. And also, what concessions are we making?
Is just a primetime neocon.
Yeah. He really is. He's awful. And what are these concessions? He's so crazy. And it's weird because he has a kind of soft, like mellifluous voice, and it couldn't be more of a contrast with what he's saying.
It's true. It's true. He does have a soft voice.
Yeah.
But everything's done toward warmongering. It's a funny contrast.
It is. Yeah. I wonder if that's why he does it. Yeah.
They teach that in neocon school.
Right.
Yeah.
Neocon 101. Let's skip forward to, this is a great, we got one other great Mike Pence clip. We'd be remiss if we didn't show it.
Pence supporter. And how does it differentiate right now from?
Wait, hold on. Got to apply for
Is a Pence supporter. And how does it differentiate right now from a Trump supporter?
Can you raise the volume?
If
It's a
you are
little
the
low.
Republican nominee, it means you're going to win over Trump supporters at some point. But right now, they're not for you. How do you convince?
It's very quiet. It's very, very quiet. I think that might be a problem with the clip. But basically, Chuck is asking Pence, who his base is, like who his people are. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Let's hear what he says. Try to turn it up all the way if you can. Well, and hold on.
Because he's angry.
Everyone turn up your volume all the way.
Well, look, I think that the people around the country, as I've traveled the last 2 years, have in the main, very humbling views about me and my family. I mean, I've been stopped in airports and grocery stores and gas stations by Americans of every political persuasion.
Probably to say F you in some cases, depending on their political persuasion, but
who thanked me for my service to the country.
How many of them wearing MAGA hats when they
and particularly thanked me for the stand that I took on that tragic day.
But are people that wear MAGA hats doing that?
Look, I know the people in our movement, and I can honestly tell you that they're some of the best people in this country. They love America, and they love our Constitution. And I have every confidence as we carry our campaign forward, and we articulate not only the way we kept faith with the Constitution on one day, but our determination to lead our party on that broad conservative agenda that's delivered not just great victories for the Republican Party, but for the American people over the last 50 years. I have every confidence that this party will come together after a good and vigorous primary, and will deliver a great victory in 2024.
how unpathetic is that? You literally need to have your elevator pitch for why people should vote for you or who is supporting you. And he could not spit it out.
Yeah. The idea of people of all political persuasion coming up to Mike Pence to thank him for his service, I don't know. I find that questionable.
Me too.
Okay. We have time for a couple more clips. Fareed Zakaria, he's making a rare appearance today. We usually ignore him just because I don't know, the show's so boring and it's so predictable. But here he is. He decided to interview Anne Applebaum, who is a staff writer for The Atlantic, advocate of every single U.S. military action ever.
Neocon extraordinaire.
Staunch neocon. And he's going to turn to her for her insights on the Ukraine proxy war.
Weekend, the world got its first official indication that the much discussed, much anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive had actually begun, when President Zelensky at a press conference alongside Canadian PM Trudeau talked about counteroffensive actions that were taking place. So, how big are the stakes here, and what can we expect from the Ukrainian forces? Can they take back their territories? Joining me now are Anne Applebaum and Oresa Lutsevich. Anne is a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and a staff writer for The Atlantic. Oresa is the head of the Ukraine Forum at Chatham House. Anne, you say that the purpose, the real purpose behind this Ukrainian counteroffensive, or the larger purpose, is not purely military. Explain what you mean.
The real purpose of the counteroffensive is to create a political change in Russia, by which I don't mean regime change. There has to be a moment when the Russian...
By which I do mean regime change. I'm just not allowed to say that.
Right.
So, yes, I
Let
do
me
actually
pretend. I'm gonna spitball how I can pretend it's not regime change. Okay.
Yeah, I don't mean regime change, but I do.
But yeah, it's regime change. Yeah.
Russians decide that the war is not worth fighting anymore, and they take their troops and leave. It's the kind of decision that the French made in 1962 when they decided to pull out of Algeria. You know, the British made that decision a number of times in their empire. There's a moment when the empire ends.
It's a little different, I think, comparing the French occupation of Algeria, which was a straight up colony, is a little different from what Russia's doing in Ukraine. But they found themselves for the first time ever seeing the world through anti-imperialist eyes, which is very convenient
Anti-Empire.
timing. Anti-Empire.
And Applebaum wants to be the new host of the Empire Files, replacing
Yes.
Abby
Oh
Martin.
my God, Abby Martin and Mike Preisner. She should ask them.
Yeah, she's anti-Empire now, you know.
Right.
So yeah.
Maybe she could not replace them, but like co-host with them.
Sure. Yeah. Because like she's against the Empire too. So you know.
Yeah, it'd be great. Yeah.
And the Ukrainians will use both military tactics as well as political tactics to convince the Russians to leave. I remember the war is over when the Russians go home. They don't have to, Ukrainians don't have to occupy Moscow. They don't have to get anybody to surrender.
They don't have to.
All they need to do is get them to leave. And so what you're going to see over the next few weeks is both, you know, the kinds of shaping operations we see now, attempts to cut off railway links and so on. You may see some bigger military moves, but you'll also see more events like this small group of Russians who went over the border, Free Russian Forces calling themselves. You'll see drones in Moscow and other Russian.
Those Free Russian Forces she mentions who went across the border into Russia from Ukraine, they're Nazis. Militia was founded by a Nazi. They're Russian neo-Nazis. She left that part out.
Yeah,
and
but they're free.
They're free, yes. The free Russian, yes. And also, they also came over into Russia with U.S. military equipment, which the U.S. says, "Oh, we don't know how they got it. They just somehow came across this U.S. military equipment."
It was a garage sale.
Yes, yeah. And again, the problem, you know, when she talks about the conflict ends when the Russians leave, the problem is there are millions of Ukrainians who identify with Russia and who want better ties with Russia. Some of them even want to be a part of Russia. And they don't leave even if Russian troops leave. And it's the Ukrainian government backed by the US that's refused to basically recognize their cultural rights for the last 8 years. And that's why, you know, there's been this war. And that problem doesn't go away even if Russian forces withdraw.
Right.
But Ukraine has no interest in basically respecting them, and that's part of the problem here. Like, what do you do about that? And I think the answer should be like you should have internationally supervised referendum to see what the people of the Donbass want, and let them decide. But that's not going to happen because I don't think actually either side wants that. But her framing of it just basically makes those people totally invisible, as if they don't exist.
Right.
Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of the show.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. As always, go to youthfulidiots.substack.com to get bonus content and to support us, and join Katie now on Colin.
Yes. See you guys at 11 a.m. EST, or I guess if you're on the West Coast at 8 a.m. So I'll see you in about 2 minutes.
All right. Bye, everybody.